Well, hello and welcome, everybody. My name is Steve Teresi. I'm the Director of Training and Technical Services. I'm located down in southern Florida, where our main headquarters is located. So I'm enjoying some beautiful sunny weather. How about you, Kevin, up in the Pittsburgh area? How are you doing?
Ooh, she's gloomy and about 45 today.
Like half of what we got. We got a heat wave coming through, and by South Florida standards, that is too. We're looking at record highs coming up. But there's somebody missing. So Mr. Rob Haynes is actually joining us from Southern California, but he's feeling a bit camera shy today. So maybe grunt hello, Rob. He is there. He's the man behind the scenes today. We're going to be talking about W0s and W1 product. Kevin's got a really great presentation put together. But before we get into that, I just want to let you know, if you can see me right now, that means you're on Facebook, and there's no reason to click any of the links that may be showing up. You are in the right place. Ignore all that stuff. We are deleting it as fast as we can. It's pretty epic today. So you are in the right spot. And Rob and I will be minding the chat as Kevin does his presentation. We may put a link or two in there, but it'll come from JL Audio specifically, not from people whose names I can't even pronounce. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Kevin. Kevin, go ahead and take it away.
All righty. Let's see here. You got me, Rob? Or
there we go.
I'll get us there. I got it. All right. So like Steve said, this is on W0v3 and W1v3 subwoofers. We're going to go ahead and kind of get into the session agenda, talk about some cool stuff to know about the W0v3 and the W1v3 subwoofers, technologies, designs, applications, questions, all of that fun stuff. And the W1 is a driver that has such a deep-rooted history with JL Audio, going all the way back to the early 90s. And we are on version 3 or V3, and it has evolved quite a bit over the years. The W1 nomenclature itself, we were talking a little bit before we went live here, is actually coming up on 30 years with the company here. So that's quite some time. It's almost as old as I am. Almost. It's pretty close. You can only imagine the history that's there with us and with this driver. So it is a very, very special presentation that we're going to go through here. So the tagline, absolute beasts for the W0s, and they are just a great looking subwoofer themselves, just very clean cosmetics. Very nice looking cone, nice logo, and all of that stuff on there. And when we talk about absolute beasts and using them, you guys are putting these things in some absolute beasts of systems here. This is 4 12W0s ported in an avalanche, so pickup truck, right? And this one was by Brandon Murphy from Audio Source. And man, I bet you this thing brings the mail home. Just absolute beasts there. Now, when we get into the W1v3s, we can take a look at a lot of cosmetic differences, but there's also a lot of functional differences with those drivers too. Some of them you can easily see when we take a look at the cosmetics. When we did the opening there, you could see that really nice, clean machine back plate on there, and you can see the top plate in these photos there too. And that dark basket with those machined aluminum pieces, man, they just look amazing together. And if you're showing off the back of the driver, I would definitely say this is the one that you kind of get into and work with. So just a very clean cosmetics on these guys. And we actually had Philip sent one of these in from Elevated Audio up in Colorado. And since it's in Colorado, it's got to be something like a Subaru there. I think it's like a 2016 Subaru with a W1v3. So really, we're going to get in and try to understand the W1 and W0 lines and walk through all these technologies. But I want to take a quick second and take a peek on how we actually got to where we are today with these guys, because they do have such a rich history with us. So we're going to start off 1992. So that is when one was introduced, long time ago. I think I was just born the year before that, actually. So
quit saying that. You're making me feel old because I remember this.
But 92 is a pretty important year for us in general. When we take a look at what actually happened there, there was a lot going on for this small little company that had coming out and releases. So not only did we come out with the W1 in 1992, but actually the first JL Audio Stealth Box was introduced in that same year too, for the Ford Mustang, I believe it was there. And then smart boxes for pickups also were out in that same exact time there too. And for those of you guys that think that we're new to component speakers and all of that in the past couple years, actually our first CS1 component set came out in that 1992 timeframe too. So we've been 30 years in with stealth boxes, speakers, and obviously subwoofers on there too. So great year for us in that 1992 timeframe. Now, as we move forward, 96, the W0 was introduced, and that was the first subwoofer that came out with the VRC. So it was a very important time frame for us there too. So that vented reinforcement collar, that's when that technology was introduced first, is at 1996. And we'll actually talk about that here because it still carries on in the W1 lineup now.
So real quick on that, Kev, just as a point of reference, the W0, when it launched with the VRC, that was the first time that we used a patented technology on a subwoofer that we were selling. It's not the first patent that we had, but the product that we had the first patent on didn't actually ship until some years later, which turned into our TW5 product, just as a side note. But the VRC was the first patent that hit the market. And I always thought it was interesting that it came in at our least expensive subwoofer price point. So one of the highest types of technology was brought in on our least expensive. And I'm sure Kevin's going to get into the reliability benefits of the VRC, and it's a big reason why we chose to do it on that entry-level product. So
it is. So 1998 is when we moved into the building that we are in now, next door to where Steve's actually at the right this second. However, in 1998, we did not take up that entire building. It was actually occupied by numerous other companies. And over the years, with our growth, we've eventually sprawled out to take over the entire building and most of the building next door at this point in time. Now we're sitting right now. So 2000 was another year for us. We had the 6W0 was added into the lineup itself, but also
such a cool little speaker,
right? And that's such a huge one. And the other big one that I've been seeing a lot come up with is the 18W3, like people looking for those older 18W3.
Josh literally just brought that up in the chat.
Did somebody? Very popular driver, and obviously super popular amplifier lineup. So that was a great time there for us. So fast forward a little bit here, we're going to jump forward and get into 2001. That's when the W7 was introduced. We got 2005, the W1v3 actually was introduced along with our marine category. So that was a big year for us there too. That whole M series lineup of speakers coming out at the same time as that W1v2 launch with that. In 2009, we came out with the W0v2. And then in 2011, the W0v3. And then last but not least, in 2013, the W1v3 was introduced. And that was actually a pretty big year for us too. The TW3s, E-subs in the home line. So there was quite a few key products that also came out in that same 2013 timeframe.
You know what's kind of funny about that? You're showing the TW3 and the E-sub. TW3 is among the smaller mounting depth drivers that we make, and the E-sub is among the largest mounting depth driver that we make. So it's kind of like a bipolar situation in 2013. Huh?
That is funny. I didn't really think about that. That is funny. So let's kind of walk down through the family just real quick, show you what options that we have in each one of these. When we take a look at the W0v3, we've got a 10, a 12, and a 15. And they're in any nominal impedance that you want, as long as it's 4 ohm. So just keep that in mind. It is 4 ohm only in those guys. And that 15 W0v3, we'll actually get into it here down the line, man. That thing has some serious potential to move some air in that lineup. So it's just a great, great subwoofer if you're looking for big output on there. Now the W1, when we take a look at the lineup there, we've got the 8W1, 10 and 12 W1v3s, and you're able to get the 10s and 12s in either a 2 ohm or a 4 ohm nominal impedance in there. So it gives you a few more options for configuration depending on your amplifier, how many subs you want to run, things like that. So it does give you those options to be able to be a little bit more configurable with what the system is that you are building there at that point in time. Now, it all starts right here with this man, Lucio. And really, you can't say enough about where he has brought us as a company with the products and how the products that he designs really speak for themselves. And he's really done an amazing job of building up a team of engineers, specifically loudspeaker engineers, as we're talking about the subwoofers here, to be able to go through and design some of these new and cool technologies. And then we can take those technologies and utilize them in speakers. Like Steve said earlier, that the VRC wasn't our first patented technology. We had another one, but we didn't utilize that technology. So a lot of times we go through and we make these technologies and we kind of put them on the shelf for a second until the right time and the right speaker and the right application comes along. And we say, oh man, this is it right here. Go ahead and take that and be able to run with it at that point in time. And they do.
Let me jump in real quick on that. So just so everyone understands, when we develop technologies like the VRC or the concentric tube or any of the other number of different things that we've developed over the years, it's not always something that's ready to go into production. It's usually conceptual ideas that we've done some verification testing and we've done some prototyping of it, but maybe we're not ready to produce it yet, which is what happened on the TW5. We had developed the concentric tube idea and we received the patent on that while we continued to develop the other parts of that speaker before bringing it to market. The VRC was a little bit, I don't want to say easy to come to market with, but we had been working on that a little bit longer, so that came to market first. But there's a bunch of stuff that we've been developing, and like Kevin said, we kind of put those technologies on a shelf until we can actually use it in production items. Sometimes that's sooner, sometimes that's later, but there's always something going on. Lucio, the man in the picture there, is brilliant, and he's so brilliant, in fact, that he's smart enough to know that he needs a team to help him. And we built one heck of a good team of engineers that are developing new concepts all the time. So watch this space. So more coming. Sorry about that, Kevin.
And we all got to see KK not too distantly there, the man, not the myth, who's really Lucio's right-hand man over there in front of the computer and kind of runs a lot of that side of the operation. So with all of that great engineering and all of those designs and all of those great aspects, it really allows these high performance and really reliable subwoofers to find their ways into really cool installations. This one was sent in from Sean from Car Toys. It's an Infinity Q50 and just a great, clean, simple installation. And I say simple, it looks simple, but I know that there's a lot of work that he's put in there with getting those lines
to make something look simple.
What's that?
Do you know how hard it is to make something look simple?
Right.
Incredibly hard. It's easier to make something look complicated than it is to make something look simple. And the guys at Car Toys obviously know that. Yeah,
they do a great job there. So the W0v3 and the W1v3, they do share a few technologies, and we'll actually get started off with the technologies that they shared, and then we'll get into some of the ones that are just specific to the W1v3. But we do have quite a bit to go through here. And before we kind of dig into those technologies, just the most basic of basic understandings of how a speaker actually goes and works. So we're going to walk you through how this speaker actually works. And this is in general, whether it's a subwoofer or anything like that. Just that general idea is what we want you guys to understand there. So there is a stationary magnet, and the voice coil interact with one another. So you have power that comes into the voice coil, and it interacts with that stationary magnet. And Steve can walk you through and talk about magnets for about 3 days later today. But we'll go through and quickly walk through this. Now, to convert that AC voltage into motion, we have the frame, and the frame actually holds all of that stuff together. And so that way your AC voltage or your signal can go through and create that movable magnet. Your frame's just holding all of that stuff together and keeps the main part of the speaker stationary. So once we get that on there, then you have your cone and your dust cap that actually go through and move your air molecules. And that's what should be moving on the subwoofer itself. And that's what compresses and rarefies your air molecules and creates your sound, translating that voice coil movement into sound waves. Now, the next important part is being able to keep all of that control. So now you have your spider and your surround on the subwoofer that are able to keep that cone and all of the motor structure and all of that in control. And that is what we call the suspension of the driver on there. So again, just keeps everything aligned. Your cone is what is moving, and your voice coil is what's moving your cone, and your AC signal is coming in. Now, you have a lot of work that is being done. And when you have a lot of work that's being done, there's usually a byproduct, and that byproduct is going to be heat. And that is something that we are going to talk about. And we have a lot of cool technologies on how to make sure that doesn't
I see what you did there. Cool technologies.
affect them negatively. It is cool technologies, right?
In more ways than one.
When we talk about all of these parts coming together and working properly, DMA really comes into play and is the heart of actually all JL audio subwoofers and speakers. And this actually started off with the W7. It's a specialized program, which is a finite element analysis. It is able to look at all of the parts of the motor and see how they are going to work together with one another. Now, there's one real key point to this, is they don't just measure all of those parts statically, but we're able to look at the parameters of all of those parts working together while they are in motion. Because, well, a subwoofer or a speaker is normally moving and creating sound. So it's a very, very key part and what is proprietary to us. Now, once we have a motor assembly that looks pretty good on paper, we'll build one, test it, and that important part of listening after you do anything. And then we'll go ahead and most likely make some changes to it and maybe build another one, and so on and so on and so on. So just because something looks good on paper doesn't mean that when you are going to listen to it that it is going to be perfect. So we normally go through a few versions of that before we get one that we are happy with.
So Kevin, let me just speak about DMA a little bit. So dynamic motor analysis, as Kevin kind of implied, it's similar to what a lot of companies use in terms of finite element analysis. And what finite element analysis is all about is predicting the behavior of the specific parts that you're modeling. Finite elements. There's a specific number of elements that you're analyzing. DMA is really special because prior to its invention by our engineering team, what was normally used would assume that the speaker is not moving very far, which of course anyone that's watching this right now knows that the speaker moves very, very far. It also would correspondingly ask for small amounts of power so that things didn't get too hot. And again, everyone that's watching knows that we use lots of power and things get really hot. So dynamic motor analysis truly was a breakthrough for us because we could analyze and predict performance under power as things were moving. Dynamic situation, which was groundbreaking for us, no pun intended. It also allowed us to reduce the number of iterations. We still build and test as we go through, but by having DMA, we could do far less of that and get a better product at the end of things. And as you saw from the timeline, when we started using DMA, we actually turned out more product faster than ever before in our company's history because of the tools that we had put into place. DMA truly was a huge step forward for our engineering team.
All righty. Thanks, Steve. So another technology that's shared between the W0v3 and the W1v3 is the elevated cooling frame. And this is basically, now that once we get the motor and all of that put together, we talk about needing to keep things cool. And heat is that huge byproduct. Like both Steve and myself had talked about, the efficiency of some of these drivers, just speakers in general, isn't great. So there is a large byproduct of heat. It's not just subwoofers, but most speakers in general aren't the most efficient things in the world there. So we need to make sure that we can take care of that heat. And this elevated cooling frame that we use in the W1 and W0v3 subwoofers is very, very neat. And it's actually a channel between the frame and the top plate. And this allows cool air to come directly in at a perfect spot on the voice coil. Because the heat is being generated from the voice coil itself, it's nice to get that air directly to it, especially at the top. It just helps tremendously and keeps those speakers running cool. And a cool speaker is going to be a speaker that's going to last you a long time and keep your reliability up and be able to keep also all of your parameters in check, like Steve kind of not alluded to, but initiated there. When you start getting a lot of heat in those subwoofers, a lot of times your parameters start to spread out and start to sway, and your tolerances start to sway. So by keeping them cool,
changes everything. It changes so much about the speaker, and keeping it cool is really important, not just for reliability, but for overall performance as well. To be honest, elevated frame cooling is not the first time people have used cooling circuits in a speaker. Pole venting has been done for years, and pole venting is really good at getting heat away from the metal part, the pole piece itself, but it's not so good at directing that cooling energy to what's actually getting hot, which is the voice coil. So by having elevated frame cooling, as well as some other technologies that Kevin will talk about in a moment, we're actually channeling the cool air to an area that's actually creating the heat. Far more efficient way of keeping a loudspeaker cool for reliability and for overall performance.
Right. And another one that we have is the vented reinforcement collar, like we talked about earlier. This one actually came in on the W0 subwoofers. Now it is found on the W1v3 subwoofer only, so just keep that in mind. And this actually addresses a couple issues that can be reliability issues. So having this on there is definitely a benefit. It's a very, very cool technology. It reinforces that junction point between the cone, voice coil, and the spider, most commonly known as the neck joint. And that neck joint can be a weak point. And that VRC increases the contact area and provides a lot of stress relief. On top of that, it also directs airflow over the voice coil windings, again, right there in that main area where the heat is actually being created. And it really helps dissipate that heat off of the voice coil itself. And like Steve said earlier, in 1996, the W0 was the first JL Audio subwoofer to use a patented technology, and that patented technology was this VRC. So moving on and talking about the floating cone attachment method, and this one's actually a pretty cool one for me because this one, along with another one that we're going to get into here in a little bit, are two of my favorite ones, just being from a mechanical mindset and knowing how things work and how sometimes tolerances, when you're kind of putting parts together and parts together and parts together, how tolerances can kind of sway, and it's called stacking tolerances. So you have a tolerance of one part and it might be on its far edge, and which is okay, but then you have another tolerance of another part and it might be on the far edge, and then you have another one and another one, and sooner or later you're having some issues because you're just on those far edge of the tolerance.
And the funny thing is, the speaker's technically in spec, but it doesn't mean anything when you're building it. If everything is on the far edge, you wind up, like Kevin said, it's stacking tolerance, and you got to pick up the, it's a terrible word to use, but the slop, the extra, all those things that are on the far edge, you have to find a way to make it still fit in a frame. The frame is kind of the last thing to get put together in my mind anyway. You build it from the ground up. the last contact point is very often the surround that sits onto the frame. You have to, adhere that in some way. And if everything is off by a little bit, you have to pick it up in that surround, and that causes the surround to get bunched up on one side and stretched out on another, causing a nonlinear behavior. The part that's stretched out is going to pull the speaker and cause the voice coil to rock inside the magnetic gap, which could cause a clacking sound, even when the speakers, should be in an otherwise really good situation. Now, for me, Kevin, the FCAM thing has always been hard to convey because I guess it is a performance enhancement, but it's a reliability enhancement at the same time. And it lacks the sexiness of a cool airflow arrow that we can show on the speaker and things of that nature. This is ultimately showing that our guys know how to build these speakers really, really well, and they understand how they go together. So FCAM allows the speaker to be built and be more reliable, and therefore it will outperform another speaker that's maybe a similar price point. But it's a hard one for me.
Yeah, I can see that. It's cool because the way they do it, just having that channel and loading adhesive in there and then setting the cone down on it, so that way it has that perfect alignment, like you said.
Moves into place, yeah.
Right. It just settles itself into place. It's very, very simple, but it's very, very cool, and just a great technology that we utilize on the W1v3 subwoofers. Engineered lead wire system is exactly what the title says itself. The lead wires are actually engineered with the rest of the subwoofer. They're not added at the end of the design. Many times those lead wires are actually an afterthought, and that can end up leading to poor performance. They're a very, very important part of the subwoofer. If they're too long, you can have noise from them slapping against the back of the cone. If they're too short, they can hinder the excursion of the subwoofer. If they're a certain type of design, like maybe woven into the spider itself, then that can also cause some different engineering tasks that need to be looked at too, and also shorten the life of the driver from having flexing all of that time. So there's a lot of thought that is put into just the most simple of things that you would think, well, you just need a wire to go in and connect the voice coil to the terminal, but it is not that simple, and we do a lot of engineering. There's tooling that we have that actually cuts every single one of these to the perfect length, has the same bow on it. And when we get into the next technology here, the insert molded subassembly, you can actually see what we do with these lead wires. They come into the terminal. Instead of going straight from the terminal into the voice coil, they actually spread out. So that way you don't have to worry about them coming in and tapping each other and shorting or anything like that. So that, again, there's a lot of thought that is put into those engineered lead wire systems on here. And this one is my other favorite part, is the insert molded subassembly. And this one's cool because it's those little things that we talked about with the stacking tolerances and all of that stuff adding up with one another. The spider, the voice coil, the terminals, the lead wires are actually all pre-assembled into one carrier. So that way we can set that carrier, that entire carrier into the basket or into the frame, like Steve said. And we're not stacking our tolerances with all of that stuff. We're made sure that we're getting it in there. And it also gives us a nice, good adhesive bond around everything on there too. And it sandwiches that spider in. Just a lot of cool things that happen with this insert mold assembly or subassembly there. So it is actually one of my favorites, along with the FCAM there, as technologies go. So now, stepping out of some of the technologies, let's take a quick look at some of the specifications of these drivers and comparing the W1 and the W0v3s. And let's start off by just comparing the 10-inch and 12-inch drivers, so that way we can have an even comparison across the board there. If you take a quick look at this, you'll notice a couple things. The W1v3 actually gives you a little bit more piston displacement due to a little bit larger piston area. So when we talk about displacement here, we're actually talking about how much air or how much potential the driver has for moving air, compressing or rarefying. It's taking the excursion and the piston surface area into account with one another. Now, since excursion is the same on all of these drivers, what we're really looking at in this comparison is that piston area of those subwoofers. So you can see that the W1v3s, whether it's a 10-inch or a 12-inch, obviously have a little bit more benefit there. The other benefit is, especially when you kind of look at the 12 there, is the sealed enclosure volumes. When we take a look at that, the benefit definitely goes to the W1v3. They fit in smaller enclosures, both the 10 and the 12, compared to that W0v3 application there. Both of them power handling right on par with one another. Mounting depths are actually pretty close to one another, except for the 10 inches a hair off. One thing you do need to keep in mind, though, is that the W0v3s, we do use a pole venting cooling mechanism on that. So you want to leave about a ½ inch or so between the bottom of the subwoofer and the back of the bottom of the enclosure. So that way you have that good airflow coming in and getting up in there and cooling those metal parts like Steve discussed earlier with them. Now, if we want to come in and add in the 8-inch and the 15, like I said, that 15 gets on it.
Thing's a beast.
If you're looking for big output and you have the room to do so, the 15W0v3 is really a great option. It actually has more excursion and more piston area, both. And that equals up to being almost double the piston displacement of two 12 W0v3s. So it's just a couple cubic inches off there. I think we're at 122, and then I think if you add up two 12s, you're at like 130 or somewhere right in there. So they're very, very close when you go from two 12 W0v3s to 115. So if you have the room to do them, it's an amazing driver. It is a great, great driver, especially, and I hate saying for the price point or anything like that, because it just in general, it's just an amazing output for that 15.
It really is. And, a lot of times our customers will contact tech support and say, what's the best way to get loud? I got to get a W7, right? Well, there's no doubt a W7 has the potential to get really, really loud. But obviously, it's a lot more expensive. You need more power to really get the most out of those drivers. And then, the box volumes are whatever they are. But that's not my go-to when it comes to getting loud. If really you're looking to get loud, if you got the room, like Kevin was just saying, this 15 is bad to the bone, man. It's not that expensive. It handles a nice amount of power. It's got really good excursion. And it's just a big freaking piston in a big, efficient box. So if you're just looking to get loud, it's not like it doesn't sound good too. It's definitely going to do the job for you. So I give that my first nod if someone says, I want to get loud, but I don't have a lot of money. 15-0 all day long, without a doubt.
Right. And your supporting modifications are a lot less than what you're getting into with a W7 type of system too, right? So it's just overall a better experience. I don't want to say better experience, but when you're looking at a budgeted system and getting loud, it's just an overall better way to do it. So piston area is definitely hands down, and they're pretty darn efficient drivers too when you look at them, right?
Big box, baby. Big box.
On the flip side of that, we have the 8W1v3, and that is a great option if you don't have room for the larger drivers. It fits in a really small enclosure, 0.35 cubic feet, and still gives you a pretty decent excursion on there. You can do these imported boxes also, so you have a lot of different options with that guy. And even the ported enclosure is pretty darn small on it, so you can get into those 8s if you want to. If you're doing behind a pickup truck or anything like that, gives you a great option where 15s just aren't going to fit. Or if you're that guy that just likes to build a really cool system and have those the people. Obviously, if somebody gets into a vehicle and there's 4 15s in there, you're going to expect it to be loud. But if you get into a vehicle and there's 4 8s in there, you may not be, your expectations may be a little bit different. So if you're that guy, which sometimes I like to get into those vehicles and listen to them, that's definitely a cool way to do it with the 8s on there too.
I love surprising people with the 8s.
Right.
People never expect an 8. They always think that you need a bigger speaker to play low frequency, and that's not true. To play low frequencies louder, it may be easier to do with a larger speaker, but if you use a few of those 8-inch woofers creatively, you can do some amazing things. And I just saw in the chat that Glenn said, send me 32 of the 8W1s and I'll have some fun. Back in the day, Manville may remember this if he's watching, there was a guy named Scott, and I think his last name, I think he officially changed it to with the 32/8s, because he actually had 32/8s in a truck. He did isobaric groups and all this kind of other crazy stuff, but he was always known as Scott with the 32/8s. That was his name forevermore. But yeah, you could surprise the heck out of people, doing some really cool stuff with 8s. What I like about the 8s is geometry is in your favor. There's lots of things you could do with 8-inch woofers that you really can't do with 10s, 12s, or certainly not 15s. You can't fit them, those larger speakers, in as many areas as you can in 8. So you can get really creative and sneak a whole bunch of 8s into various different locations, hide them, and when you fire that system up, you'll blow people's mind. I never knew you could get that kind of performance out of an 8-inch woofer, is a comment that I've heard more times than I care to admit. So it is a lot of fun, Kevin, to surprise people with what an 8 can actually do. Loud and low frequency when you do them right, and especially if you use a more than a handful of them.
Brandon actually sent this system in. This one's not going to surprise me as being loud because he's got 6 12W1s in a pickup truck, in an extended cab pickup truck. I would imagine that this thing has to just rail on it. He's got 3 RD 501s on it. And again, it's just an extended cab. It's not the big 4-door or anything like that. But this is a great example of using a really good system design to get a lot of piston area to really move some air. If you think about it, he's running 1,500 watts, not a ton of power. But he's gonna be pushing some air. He's got a lot of piston area there. He's gonna move some air, and that thing's gonna be loud. And plus, it looks just a great looking install on there too. So let's get into some of the applications and uses on this. This is kind of the fun part. We use the W0v3s and W1v3s in many different applications. And I appreciate not only what we have to offer for them, but what you guys are actually building and doing with these drivers on there also. And we're going to actually start off with the W0v3 family. You can purchase these in the base wedge enclosures. You can get single 10, single 12, dual 10, and dual 12 options on there. And these are just a great enclosure to be able to go through. It is a ported or a vented enclosure, so you have that ability. One of the nice things about this, if you see the front of that enclosure has the 2 rails coming down the side. If you have an SUV or something like that, you can actually tilt this thing up and have those guys down firing in that type of application too. So you have some options with doing this. Another thing I see a lot of people doing is taking this enclosure and building trim panels around it rather than completely redesigning the wheel and figuring out all the port specs and doing all of that stuff, making sure that's all perfectly right. They take this enclosure, build some trim panels around it, and it's a great looking, clean installation. And it's going to sound great because we went through and designed that enclosure itself.
Yeah, that dual 12 box hammers.
Yeah, and I was going to say we had one sent in here that was with an RD amplifier. You can see in the corner there, and just a great simple clean install and subwoofer enclosure that you're able to throw into a trunk, and it's going to sound good and it's going to get on it. They do have a ton of output with this guy, with these guys. So just keep that in mind as an option. Now, the W1v3 family, we're actually utilize these in a lot of stealth box applications. And there's many different applications out there that are available. We have some GM SUV, some Toyota applications, a Camaro convertible application. There's actually quite a few of these stealth boxes that we have with the W1v3s actually preloaded in them. And those stealth boxes are all 100% made in our fiberglass area, manufactured by our fiberglass team. We have many, many different stealth box enclosures that are out there that come with many, many different drivers in them throughout the lineup. And with stealth box being a majority of what our fiberglass department is able to produce, we're actually able to come up with quite a few of those a week to be able to go through and produce and get those out there. So all the stealth boxes, from laying the matting all the way to final testing, is 100% done in Miramar, and it is one of the staples of our company in JL Audio. When we take a look, when you take a look at any type of prefabricated enclosure that kind of fits in a vehicle specific area, it normally comes with that stealth box name, even though it may not be one. But we really did come up with that category, and we really stapled that category, and we do amazing with it. The fit and finish on those enclosures and the testing that goes through, not only for each vehicle, but then figuring out what subwoofer is going to work best in that specific vehicle. We do a lot of testing with these guys to make sure everything is perfect with them. And one thing that is cool is once we do and we load that W1v3 into the stealth box enclosure, we actually hook it up, test it, make sure the enclosures don't have any rattles or anything like that, make sure all's good. There's no air leaks coming out of anything. Everything's perfect. So they are 100% QC checked with the stealth box enclosures in-house. Now, moving on to some custom enclosures that you guys have sent in to us. This one's from Mark from Car Audio Fabrication. This is a great looking, very clean, very sharp lines, I should say, on this enclosure. He's done a very, very nice job with the materials and the lines, the venting, and all of that.
Beautiful execution of a very nice idea.
It is. It's a great execution, and it's one of those things. It looks fairly simple, but the lines are all super sharp and everything's super clean on there. And he's definitely put some thought on that. I actually seen the inside of this enclosure. He has multiple bracing in it and everything like that. He's done a very, very good job with this piece. He
made something complex look simple. Not easy.
Right. So this one was actually sent in from Tyler Dove from Unique Car Audio down in Gilbert. I don't know if he's watching on here with us. I know he hops in every once in a while and spends some times with us. If he's not here, hey man, we're showing your thing, so you missed out. But again, this is a great example of an enclosure. Very clean lines, looks good. The materials are utilized, very, very proportionate to one another, and just a good looking, clean install on how sharp everything fits together. Tyler, the guys at Unique, did a great job on this enclosure.
They usually do.
And it looks great. This one here was one that hit home for me. I always like seeing dealers building these great enclosures and doing all of this this great thing, but this one kind of hit home for me. Carl and his son actually built, or I would assume it's built by now, this enclosure for two 15W0s. And having great audio ultimately is the end goal. And if you have the skill, tools, knowledge, all of that good stuff to spend some time in the garage teaching others, it really does hit home for me as a trainer, installer, fabricator, and a dad. It really does cover the gambit of everything on there. So good on you guys. I hope you are enjoying this enclosure by now, and really having a fun time with it and listening.
It's a pair of 15W0s, guys. It's going to be fun for sure. If it's not already done, it's going to be awesome.
Right. So what is the right subwoofer for you? Well, it's going to come down to a couple different things. Does your enclosure or does your install require a smaller enclosure, smaller airspace in there? Do you require a 2 ohm nominal impedance for your subwoofer? You may have to step into that W1v3 lineup if your amplifier does not work with that. If you're only doing one sub and you're trying to maximize the amplifier, or if you're doing multiple, more than just two, then you might need to have that 2 ohm nominal impedance subwoofer. So just keep that in mind as you're designing your system. It may force your hand to go one way or the other there. And if you need a size other than a 10 or a 12 inch, if you're looking to do 15s or if you're looking to do an 8, that may sway you between the W0v3s and W1v3 subwoofers. Custom enclosures or prefabricated enclosure, again, that's going to sway you if you're doing a stealth box enclosure. So it's going to really kind of get you going. Either way, they're both great subwoofers. They have a ton of design and engineering in both of them, and they both use some pretty cool technologies on them. Both great sounding subwoofers, and do very well with either choice that you're going to work with. It just depends on what your expectations, what your goals are, and all of that stuff. So just keep that in mind as you're making your decisions on which ones that you want there. And then if you need more support, if you have some questions about which one may fit your specific goals and needs better, feel free to reach out to our tech support. They will help you out tremendously. Best guys in the business, Lee, Eric, Carlos, all of those guys are great and do an amazing job there. They'll be able to go through and help you out with enclosure sizes. If you're doing multiples, if you're looking at a different type of enclosure, they'll be able to help you out. Maybe your specific opening of your trunk doesn't fit our recommended box size. Maybe they can help you work with the dimensions a little bit better to fit your needs on there. Or maybe they can direct you in some equipment that you might need rather than just that. So feel free to reach out for them. If you're not super familiar with the ways to reach out to them, there's a help icon on the support link for JL Audio or on jlaudio.com. You can also email them at technical@jlaudio.com, or you can call in at the number you see here on the screen and follow the prompts to tech support. Hands down, the easiest way to do it is the support link on jlaudio.com, especially if you're looking for enclosure recommendations. It's hard to give you dimensions and all of that good stuff over the phone. So to be able to just email you and go back and forth on there, it makes it a lot easier with them. So we're able to get that all going for you. Now, there is the training team, which is us. Rob's here listening. He's not on, but he is here. So we're able to go through. You can contact us, but if you are going to contact us, make sure that it's not for tech support. I can build enclosures, but those guys have programs and have a lot more experience in building enclosures than I do. They probably go through at least a couple enclosures that they're helping people out with a week. So they have a lot more familiarity with what works and what doesn't and all of that good stuff. Now, if you do have some suggestions on trainings that you want to hear, times that may work better, days of the week that may work better, or any of that good stuff, then feel free to reach out to us. If you have comments on whether you like my beard shorter like this or longer, again, you can contact the training team at training@jlaudio.com. But again, not for tech support. Contact tech for tech. They, again, are the best guys and the smartest ones out there.
Very often when you guys reach out to Kevin, Rob, or myself, we just turn around and ask them the questions anyway. It's just more efficient to ask them directly. But hey, Kevin, that was great. Thank you for going through the lineup like that for us. Shared some good insight into how the speakers are designed and what went into all of that. My personal favorite is the images that you shared, showing people using creative applications for those products. These do come in at the lower end of our price point, so that does kind of make them a little bit more widespread. And to see them being used in some high-level installations like you saw from the images today, I think that's really cool that people are doing that. And at the end of the day, they're JL Audio products, guys. And these things are designed to be very high-performing subwoofers, even though they're not as expensive as some of the more prestigious ones like the W6s or the W7s. But I saw a couple of questions in the chat regarding some of the materials that we choose to use one way or the other. And I just want to remind people that the engineers have access to all of the materials all the time for any one of the designs. And as you look through the line, if you really take a step back, you can see that, yes, one of these products uses a foam surround and another one uses a rubber surround. And if you look at the other end of the spectrum, the W6s and the W7s, one of those uses a foam surround and one of those uses a rubber surround. So it's not just a matter of cost related to some of the materials. It's a performance benefit It's kind of a balancing act of what's going to give the performance that the engineers are looking for with that particular design. And in some cases, we've made changes, running changes over the lifespan of a product. So rubber is not better than foam. Foam is not better than rubber. It's just a different design choice. And the engineers, again, they have these tools at their disposal to use as they see fit to give the performance that they're looking for, which does sort of dovetail a little bit into the recommendations on enclosure volumes. I saw some of that come up in the chat as well about, do I get more performance if I go slightly bigger on the box or slightly different on the box? The recommendations that we make are intended to give you great results with that product in the majority of the applications you're likely to use it in. Now, if you're an outlier, and what I mean by an outlier is if you're dealing with a really, really tiny interior or really, really large interior, there may be some adjustments that our tech team can give you to give better performance in that application. But the vast majority of the time, our recommendation is our recommendation for a reason. We want it to sound great all the time. And those recommendations will give you great performance with that product, just like the materials chosen for that product in that recommendation are chosen for that exact same reason, to give you great performance. So a little bit of a rant there. I apologize. I saw a bunch of questions come in. I figured I'd try to answer them all in one time, right? All right. Looking at the chat, Rob has been on it pretty good. He's in a compromised situation, so he couldn't be as fast as we would have liked him to be at times. He got in there as much as he could. There was a question about break-in period, and both Josh and Rob jumped on that. Basically, the stance on break-in is we anticipate that you're going to play this thing. Just don't be crazy right out of the box. Give it a day or so. Just play it normal. Just don't go nuts, and you'll be fine. That's break-in. When we actually spec the parameters for our subwoofers, just a little insight into what we do, we'll build a whole bunch of them, whatever the number is. I'm not sure what they're doing lately, but they'll build a whole bunch of them. Then they'll run a break-in period on them for whatever period of time. Then they'll measure all the parameters on all of those speakers and average them together, and that becomes the specs that we go to market with. So there is no one golden sample. It's truly an average of a bunch of speakers that have all been broken in over a period of time. The expectation is when you get the product, our manufacturing is very consistent, so you should get something that's easily within that range of average drivers. And once you play it for a little bit, it's going to be exactly what we had hoped for. So that's the plan there. So speaking of that, if you're a consumer and you go to a shop like Elevated Audio, the guys at Car Toys, or Glenn Savage up in Georgia, let them tune the system for you, get great performance. And after a week or two, head back over there, see if they can dial it in a little bit more and get a little bit more out of it, just to see. I would not spend any time just, playing the speaker off in the corner and just waiting for it to break in. Enjoy it. Just don't be crazy.
Yeah, we definitely anticipate that these guys are going to be used hard for sure.
And, a lot of the technology that you talked about, that's kind of why the W0 was the first woofer to use a VRC. We know that at the lower end of the price point, more people can gain access to it, and some of those people are going to be really abusive. So what we tend to see is higher failure rates on a less expensive product, maybe because they don't use really good materials. We choose to try to be a little bit better in that regard. But I like to say that we hit it with engineering. When we see issues with a product that comes in through warranty, which, as a side note, that's where engineering starts, at the warranty department. When we see failures come in through the back door, we go over to engineering and say, hey, what can you do to solve this? And that's where the VRC was born. We saw similar failure modes on similar products over the period of years. So we collected all that data, and the engineers hit it with engineering. They developed the VRC. The neck joint and the top of the voice coil burning were the two most common failures that we saw. So they sought to address both of those with a single part. That's why we got the patent on it. It was a pretty cool idea. So... sorry, my humor.
Yeah, Rob was on these. I'm looking through the comments here. Rob did a good job on all of these guys, and
indeed he did. It's hard on a single monitor like he's dealing with right now. I got two things going on, so it's
right. And that, correct me if I'm wrong, but the W1v3, I want to say, or the W1v3. It's like the best-selling subwoofer for quite some time.
Yeah,
Like to
really
revamp that into the WV3 was a big deal. I'm sure you kind of went back and forth with that.
Calling me old.
At least I didn't say the V1 to V2.
So before we started, I was talking to Kevin, Rob about this, but back in 19 something, it doesn't even matter if it's 19 something, it's a long time ago, but Car Audio and Electronics, it was a magazine. That was a document that was made out of paper that used to show up in your mailbox. So for those that don't know what that is, but Car Audio and Electronics magazine had an anniversary edition, and in that edition they did a review on the 10W1. And I remember the cover of the magazine was like a yellowish color, and it had a birthday cake on it, and they had dropped the 10W1 on the birthday cake and splattered it and said happy anniversary to us or something like that. And I remember the comment that said that JL Audio's woofer crashed the party. But the heritage of the W1 going back as far as that, in my memory, that those types of woofers, the W0s and the W1s, were really foundational for our company. Obviously, Kevin, as you mentioned, the rate of sale was always very strong on these products, owing to their performance and their price point. But their technology, we showcase technology at these price points before we did it at the higher price points. And I think that says a lot about who we are as a company. It's not just how expensive can we make this product. It's how reliable can we make it? How great can we make it sound at these lower price points? In fact, the W0 product, the latest iteration of it, came from a design study from the engineers. What can we do to give great performance at a lower price point and still be JL Audio quality? And that's how some of these products are born. The engineers take it as a challenge. And in some ways, that's harder than designing something like a W7. Where, I don't want to say cost us no object. Cost is always going to be some kind of an object. But at the lower price points, when we know that people are a bit more sensitive to spending that money, we want to make sure that they get a great product. They're buying JL Audio. They expect something from us. And we want to deliver that even at those lower price points. And that's harder. It's kind of like those more complicated systems made to look simple. Lower price product it's not cheap. It's just lower price, and it's a lot harder for the engineers to develop a product at those lower price points and still make it a JL Audio level product. So
yeah, it still has to perform. It still has to be reliable. It still has to sound great. So there's a lot of bar there that we got to clear at a price point, right?
Absolutely. Ben Fritz actually has that magazine. Well, help me out, man. Post an image. Oh, yeah, he's quoting from it. I remember that now. So what he's quoting in the chat there, that the 10W1 made the highest SPL at 30 hertz and the second highest at 25 and 50 hertz. And it was in the second smallest box in the test at 0.9 cubic feet sealed. What they didn't report on is the actual outside of the box was significantly larger than that. There was a ton of bracing inside there. And, we had done that training a few weeks ago, I guess it was, on the myth of the magic box, and we talked about bracing and how important that is for performance. And some of the images that Kevin shared with us earlier, you could actually see the integrity of those enclosures. Like, the one I have in my mind is the one that gets those with 12s with the plexiglass on the side. And I think you had mentioned RD amplifiers. That box is definitely built like a certain type of house, so made out of brick house. really solid. And honestly, performance is going to be directly related to how well you build that enclosure. So the quote that Ben shared with us shows that when we submitted that subwoofer for evaluation, we spent a lot of time and attention paying attention to that build quality as well. So I guess it paid off for us pretty good. So
thanks for that share, Ben.
Yeah, without a doubt.
All righty. Well, it looks like we got pretty much everything in there.
Yeah, I think we did. I'm just scrolling. Sorry for my silence as I scroll. See what we got. I think we got it all, Kev. I think you did an awesome job, and there's some good questions and comments in the chat, and Rob jumped on as many of those as he possibly could. A brick house built for a specific use. Yes, Curtis, that's the house I'm referring to.
That's a good one, Curtis. I might have to borrow that off you sometime.
And on that merry note, I am going to say goodnight and farewell to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. As Kevin mentioned earlier, share your feedback with us. We'll do our best to try to accommodate as much as we can. So until next time, I'll say goodnight.
Good night, everybody. Thanks for joining us.